Sloyd knives for wood carving. You can go crazy about it, or you can stay cheap. There really isn't too much of a right or wrong answer. Then what's going to end up happening is maybe you're going to be sharpening more, or maybe you'll have to remove material to get to the kind of ideal shape that you want the blade to be. But we're going to go through all of these Sloyd knives that I have here, and we're going to talk about some of the differences of them, what I like about them, and maybe what they like would be good for, and some things that I don't like about some of them. So let's just get into it. So to start, you might notice that this is a pretty old looking Mora, and that it's got quite the blade on it, as you can see, and it's also quite beat up, but then you could just take that handle off and resharpen this and it'd be good to go. But so the main thing about this, why I wouldn't want to use this for spoon carving in general, like you could use it for like out in the bush or something if you want to be able to also like do some other stuff with your knife, but just for general like spoon carving at home, I wouldn't use this because it's really wide. So when you're trying to go inside the tight neck of a spoon or something like that, as you're trying to go around the corner, the back of this knife is going to hit the side of the wood before you can make your full turn. And that's why in the next Sloyd here, that the Mora 106, which is probably like the most popular Sloyd knife out there, this one has a hollow grind on it right now, but when you get it, it's got a Scandi grind. And these knives are great because of the profile of them, basically. So well, the profile and the angle of them. So it's got between like a 25 to like 32 degree bevel, I guess. I think there's like quite a bit of variance. But these knives are great. They can do nice turns. You get a nice finish with them. These older ones are laminated steel, but I think you can possibly get laminated steel ones. But like I haven't tried the carbon ones, but I don't see why they'd be any different. That laminated steel is just soft steel on the sides, so like I don't know, the core of these might be harder, but that's something I probably wouldn't even care about too much. Like I wouldn't mind having a carbon, because actually what ends up happening when you're sharpening a laminated blade, you might not think about it at first, but when you're rubbing it over like some kind of abrasive surface, you are going to wear away the soft steel faster than the hard steel. So you have to consciously be putting more pressure on the edge of a laminated steel knife, I've noticed, or else you're just slowly changing the angle and making it like closer to like 20 degrees. And we're going to go over a really severe version of a knife that has where the bevel's too steep. Is that the word? And the angle is too low. So then next, well, we have the Flexcut Sloyd. So I talked about this a little bit in my last video, but basically the difference between these is I measured the degree of bevel on this, and you can just kind of tell from just how like wide the bevel is with the steel thickness. Like that's one way to kind of like tell. But so I already had assumptions that this was a 20 degree, but I measured it and they are 20 degrees. So then they're really good for basswood or just like general like material removal. You can finish a whole spoon with this as well. It's just the Mora is a little bit better for the less grain tear out, and also like those turning cuts. Just because when you think about block planes and stuff like that, or just like hand planes in general, like those blades are often very angled, and it's because they're trying to avoid tear out. So that when you have a higher angle on the blade, you get less tear out. So a lot of those guys with hand planes, maybe they have like a 20 degree primary bevel, or no, I think it's usually like 25 or something. But then their blades usually end up with like around like a 30, that some of them are like 35, 40 degree bevels on them, and that's just like they're trying to like get the least amount of tear out. But so that's the Flexcut Sloyd. Then this is basically like the exact same as that. It's pretty much just a different handle, so it doesn't have that little steel part on it, so you can kind of carve the handle the shape. So this isn't how it comes. It has one of like just kind of the flare shape right there. It comes with it at the top as well, so I carved that away, and that's something that people typically do with this knife. So if you want to knife it, you can carve it, and you don't want to worry about possibly hitting that. These are pretty good. Always make sure your tools have sheaths, because as we're talking about right now, these edges are very fine. If these hit any kind of metal or hit each other or anything, you're going to chip your edge. And then, so these are basically like kind of factory-ish. Like a Flexcut that hand polishes all their blades. The Mora ones are done in factories. This old one was probably done by like a good amount by hand. But so this one right here is one that I made with my friend Caleb. So this was basically like my first Sloyd knife, and it ended up really small because I was just trying to like learn how to get flat bevels on it basically. But it ended up actually being a pretty handy Sloyd, so I wouldn't use this for general spoon carving because as you can see it's really small and that's a really fine tip. Which, is my tip still there? Nope, you might be able to see my tip's broken. I was using this recently. Let's see if we can... But yeah, so, but the tip sharpens back up on this one really easily because of how fine it is. But this is a really good knife for getting in like detail work where something like this knife would be too wide, so you're trying to get in a small space, but as you're trying to put the tip of this knife in, it starts to hit the belly. And with this one, because it's really straight and small, it can get in that area. So there's actually been a few times where this has been a lifesaver for me. Then this one, I don't think I've actually really shown it very much, like anywhere. But this is my blade from Reid Schwartz. So I got this one back in 2017, I think, and like a beautiful blade with a black locust handle. There you can see it's got a flat over hollow grind on it right now. So when I bought it, it just had a hollow, and now, actually, I think he had small flats on it, but now the flats are a lot bigger and they're kind of uneven just from my hand sharpening over time. But I love this knife. And there's not too much to say about these, honestly, other than like they usually hold a bit better edge than these other knives, and they're kind of they're a joy to use, and they're also like all one steel. And a big part about these handmade knives for me is the handles. So it's basically the handles, and that unless the angle on your last blade was wrong or it wasn't flat, you're not gonna it's not gonna be the biggest difference in the world. But it feels really good to use a handmade Sloyd, especially the handles that people come up with them, and like we'll go through some, like one of mine soon too. But and this is what that people are looking for in a handmade Sloyd basically. So the handle's all about what you would like. So this would probably be smaller. They're too small for some people, but I like it. But so what did I pay for this knife? I think I paid like 170 or something, but like that was back in the day as well. So like there's a really high demand for Reid's knives. So then, and he also like just keeps going up in quality as well. So then you'll pay a good price for it, and it's hard to get a hold of it. You have to make sure to subscribe to his email list, but they're great knives. And there's some other makers like Matt White, and that I don't have any of his knives. That like Greenhaven Forge I know of. Those are probably a couple of the main makers that I'd recommend off the top of my head right there. But well, we'll go through a few more right here as well. So here's an Adam Ashworth. That I could have did a better job with my last hand sharpening of it, but it cuts good. So I got the blade from him, and then I made the handle. So this is a torrefied maple handle, basically just roasted maple. But this is a 90 millimeter Sloyd, which kind of became popular a little while ago. And what's nice for it is basically being able to get all the way across a rim, but also like when you're doing your slicing cuts and you're kind of using the full length of the blade, then you basically have more length. But it's a little bit harder to control, and also you have to get used to it because I know they do a lot of push cuts, and you want to make sure that you are realizing that your extra length is there, that you're not going to hit your hand. And he also has rounded spines, which is kind of nice. Then this is one that I made. So this is one of my first Sloyds. I'm still making more right now, but I have to hollow grind them on my Tormek right now before I sell them. But so this is a 1084 Sloyd with a flat over hollow grind, and then black cherry handle. It works pretty good. I'm still testing this one out. I actually just resharpened it recently. So I was like beating it really aggressively through some cherry, and I had a couple like tiny little like micro nicks on the edge, which normally you wouldn't even notice until you're at a certain. So if you don't knife finish your spoons, yeah, you're probably not going to notice that like the little tiny marks left from that not perfect edge as much. But then once you are doing the knife finish spoons and you're looking for that, like if you even just have a tiny little burr left on your edge from sharpening, you're gonna see it, and it'll drive you crazy. So then making sure you have a really good edge is really important. And then these are some of it. So this one I haven't actually used in a long time. This was one of the first Sloyds I bought. I bought it rough ground from Svante Djarv. But I did not know what rough ground meant exactly back in the day. So I've had a decent edge on it, but now like I was working it down. I was waiting to get my Tormek basically to kind of go back at it. So that, and also the handle came loose. So this is a good reason to not use cheap epoxy. And I ended up cutting the tang down a little bit actually. But just because what I plan to use this for, like that's plenty tang for me. But so this was my first knife I made, and yeah, like it ended up coming loose. So there's a good reason to not use the cheapest epoxy in the store. There's a fail right there. But so then these knives, like as I was saying before, it's a little bit wide, but this is like a really like robust Sloyd, so then it'd be good for carving cups and stuff like that. And it's a good belt knife basically. Like you want to be able to kind of do a little bit of everything, but also be able to carve because you have that really fine edge. So you can think about it kind of almost like a handmade version of this, or like the Mora Companion almost. And it's not quite the same shape as a Mora Companion. I think they have more belly and stuff, but like that's how I was basically using this. Then I'll put that one back. And there's one more, and oh, actually there's two more. So this is an old one from Belzeboo. So this is like back in like 2016 or something like that. And so it was when he was first started out. And as you can see, the bevels are pretty big for how thin it is. And this bevel is too low of an angle to support an edge for wood carving. So I haven't actually measured it, but at a certain point, you can go too much. So like say like this cuts fruit really easily. Like that's actually what I was using it for recently, was I was cutting up fruit with it. Yeah, because I was thinking of that edge and I was like, there's a few little nicks on the edge, but I bet you that would be like a really great fruit slicer because it's not gonna have any resistance to like chip the edge. And I was absolutely right. But then yeah, so now I'm gonna have to take that back to a Tormek or something, or that I might just grind the edge down so that like it's not quite as wide, and then just grind a new bevel into it at the right angle that I want. And then last but not least is I have two of these that I really need to put handles on, but that I want to make sure I do it justice. Is that San Mai blades from K. Embretsen over in Sweden. So you can just see like it's beautiful. So I have two of these, and he makes Damascus ones as well. So there's an oil on it right now, which I'm not gonna wipe off because it's going right back in the box after this with the stabilized pieces of wood that I plan to make the handles out of. But K. Embretsen, like he always has blades available. Like he's been a full-time blacksmith since the 80s. Like what more can you ask for? Like go get a blade from K. So then that's all my Sloyd knives. I'm gonna be selling more of my own. So maybe if you're watching this video like a few months in the future, you'll be able to go to my website and grab a Sloyd. But this is kind of like an introduction on like all the different Sloyd knives. And yeah, as I said at the start, which you probably forgot after drooling over the handmade knives, like I probably would, especially when I first started. The majority of the time I'm using these because I don't have I don't have an attachment to them other than like $40 or whatever it was I spent on them. So I'm not afraid to use them on things, and I'll just like use them all the time for everything, and they end up performing really well for me. So that I would definitely I would not get a handmade knife first, especially if you're not used to sharpening. Like you might think that you're good at sharpening, but as you get better at carving, your perfect edge is gonna keep getting further and further away from you, because then what you qualify as a good finish, it just gets better and better. So, well, there's so many like videos I could do. I could nerd out about this for hours. And so I hope I didn't talk too much. Let me know in the comments if you want more videos like this, because I can rant for hours. I live by myself with my dog, and I just make stuff all day. So and in my workshops and stuff like that too, I basically just talk at people the whole time. So, but let me know, guys.